All right, so let's then move on to the big one. We talk about it. We've got two MLS news points and a Twitter sphere chat, right? And this one kind of ties into both of them. This is like two and a half with a Twitter thing. So a few weeks ago, FIFA was removed as a defendant in a case which barred overseas leagues from playing their games in America, essentially opening the doors for leagues like La Liga and the Prem to do as the NFL does in their regular season and play games in other countries. Now, Don Garber has come back in to push back against this idea, trying to keep those games for summer friendlies only. And currently, we're in a waiting game. Now, there's a lot to break down on this, but I need to start by once again highlighting how toxic this anti-MLS crowd is. So if we go back to when this first happened, right? The first news of this thing dropped. Everybody on Twitter who was against it was up in arms because it's the worst case scenario for the game. It takes away from the fans' ability to see their team play live, and it breaks the sporting merit pyramid, blah, 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 right? Never once mentioned MLS. The second Don Garber steps in and gets involved, the narrative switched to, well, yeah, Don Garber is like saying the right things and defending us, but it's clearly because he only cares about MLS's position and MLS's money and not anybody else's. So we can't take anything he has to say from heart. And like goes down this whole rabbit hole of why Don Garber defending them is bad and being on their side is bad. Like, my nerds, have a day off. This is one of the most powerful people in the country when it comes to soccer and soccer influence. And he is out here standing up in defense of a take you made just a week ago, saying that you don't want this to happen. And you're going to spend your time complaining about it because you want to push an anti MLS agenda. Go outside. Like, this is stupid that you guys can't literally just deviate yourselves from your agenda for 1 minute to be like, okay, good. Somebody who makes, all they do is complain about how much influence he has. Now, the guy with influence is now defending you and helping you out. And you're like, nope, can't have it. Absolutely not. Don Garber, worst of the worst. Breathe, guys. Just breathe.
Can you remind me again what Garber said?
So Don Garber basically came out and was like, we don't want to do this because we're going to have to move schedules around. It's going to take away from interest in soccer here. It's going to, cause a whole bunch of issues, whatever, right? I don't know exactly what he said, but he came out against it. He's like, we don't want this to happen. And instead of being like, awesome, everybody on US soccer is on the same side here. Nobody wants them to come in. They're like, nope, Don Garber said it. So we have to figure out why Don Garber saying it is in the wrong taste, even though it's the right words. And we need to make sure that we show that we are anti Don Garber and anti MLS, even though we're both on the same side. Like, just stay on your stance. You don't need to spread it this wide and attack. Like it just I'm really glad this week I had a lot of work on my thesis because I didn't spend a lot of time on Twitter. It made my life really, really good. But unfortunately, I did come across that and I had to get it out.
I could tell it's been eating you up.
Just like it's just again, we're not out here like, oh yeah, MLS is perfect. Stop talking bad about them. Like just pick and choose your battles, right? To come out here and be like, oh, they're on the same side as us, and then try and spin it so that you can prevent people from thinking you're pro MLS because you guys are on the same side of one topic. Go outside. Your thoughts
Yeah,
on? Oh, go ahead.
I'm a little bit on the fence on it. I feel like I can see benefits either way. I mean, obviously, if they come in and they're playing around the same time that MLS is playing, it's definitely going to have an impact on MLS and their views and people who go to the games because if you're, let's just say, a Charlotte fan and you're a Real Madrid fan, and Real Madrid just happens to be coming and playing in Charlotte for this particular weekend, this Saturday or whatever, like, oh, well, I'm gonna go skip the Charlotte game because I want to go see Real Madrid. How many chances do I get to see Real Madrid? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's valid to say that it would be something that's not going to help MLS if it's going on at the same time. I think an area where it can maybe help MLS, and maybe this is a stretch, and you can tell me if you think I'm stretching this a little bit, but if they came in and they played in the off time, the MLS is not, going on at the same time. There's not a competition. They keep it to the summer. They play a couple games in the South in the winter or something like that. I think it could be a good opportunity to get non-soccer fans into the sport more. And then when these guys leave, if Real Madrid comes in, Man City, Arsenal, they all come over, they play a couple games. Some people check it out for the first time, check out the sport, like, oh, I recognize a couple of these names, like why not? They're here, I'll go check it out. And then they really like it, and now these teams move on, and MLS comes rolling around in February or March. Okay, well, let me check out my local team now. Let me see, I kind of liked watching that. Let me check out some more stuff. So from that regard, I could see potentially these bigger teams, well marketed teams coming over, getting a few more people into the sport, and then potentially turning that into MLS support. Uh, I don't know how much of that will actually happen. It could be a small percentage, but I think if done right, there's potential to grow for both sides. But you've seen it with the Super League. People just see dollar signs in their head or in their eyes, and it doesn't matter who they're impacting or what's the right word, like the secondary effects of their actions. It doesn't matter, like,
unintended consequences.
sure, yeah, like it doesn't matter who gets impacted by those unintended consequences. It just matters about getting as many dollars as you can.
I like where you're going with that. I have similar feelings with different rationale. So let's talk about it. The first things first, I think it's really funny because you've got, again, the same 5 people on Twitter: Tack Manager, 343, World Soccer Talk. They're all out here like, oh my God, this would be great. And it's for one of two reasons. One, it's going to kill MLS. And that's what we want to see. Or they think that it's going to force them to adapt and change and get better, right? Those are one of the two reasons that they're out there. I've got 2 problems with this idea. First, NASL history. One of the most prominent reasons for their demise, outside of the overspending with the underattended matches, all that stuff, was the fact that people stopped going to games when the quality dropped from what they were used to see. So I have to find the reference, but I remember reading a book a few months back that essentially the league started up around the end of a World Cup cycle, and I think it was the one in Mexico, that it was like everybody got into it and they watched a whole bunch of games over there, right? And everybody got really excited. They see all the best players playing at the highest level with the best quality, right? And then like, oh, NASL's here. I'm gonna go watch it. And I believe the quote was, and it may not be exact, but I think it's close enough. Fans ended up having to watch a slower, less technical, and overall more boring version than the games they saw a few months back, leading to decreased attendance and decreased revenue. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a shock to anybody. MLS, not at the level of those European leagues that are coming here, like significantly lower. Don't know if that broke any news there, but spoiler alert. Welcome to US soccer, right? That being said, even if you bring like mid-level teams over, right? You bring over, gosh, now I need to pick random La Liga teams I've never heard of. Rayo Valladolid and Mallorca.
Nice.
Keep the knowledge, baby. Get in. You bring those guys around, you're gonna, like you mentioned, you're gonna have people who are like, when is the next time I'm gonna get a chance to see teams that aren't here every week? So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna watch them, right? Now here's where my thought switches from yours. Okay. I don't think MLS feels this impact the most, because I think we're at a point right now where we've got enough of a love for the top level of game that we're at right now, where even if they skipped a game or two, it wouldn't prevent them from coming back like, oh, this is so bad I can't watch it. Right. I think people understand now that this is not great. And the people who have been going to games are not going to be put off if another better level comes, right? Where I think this really hurts is these lower leagues, right? We're going to talk about, again, defending the lower leagues of USL, which apparently we don't do enough, because why would we as a MLS podcast, but whatever. Yeah. So the lower leagues are the ones that are going to get hurt the most, I think. If you look at general attendances, and I'm using general with a big, bold word, general, right? Because there are obviously outliers to this theme. They usually turn out in the low thousands, 2, 3, 4, versus MLS's low tens of thousands, right? 15 upwards to 25. If you're playing, let's say hypothetically, we play 6 weeks, 3 home games worth of European fixtures in and around those cities. As you mentioned, the kids are going to be begging their parents to go see we'll pick Louisville, for example, right? Louisville and Lexington, right? If they go to Rupp Arena and play on the football field in Rupp Arena in front of 60,000 people, which again, I'm not saying it would, but I'm just using it as an example. The kids in Lexington, who are all massive Real Madrid fans or Spanish, whatever, are going to say, yeah, I don't want to go to the Lexington game today, even though I play for the club. I want to go watch Real Madrid play whoever, right? You do that 3 times in a home site, in a cycle for your season where you only have, let's say, 15 home games. That chunk that you're feeling in terms of ticket revenue, stadium revenue for merch and food and things like that is well greater felt in the lower league side than it would be felt by any MLS side. And again, barring a few, of course, right? That is one of the things that I think MLS would get through that because we do it with the friendlies, right? Those big friendlies that come around all the time. We get through that, right? And USL gets through that too, right? But if you now double that impact where you're doing the preseason friendlies and then you're doing this leagues coming over and playing whenever
like meaningful games,
you're doubling that up. Again, MLS is still going to take a hit. USL is going to take a hit. Nice is going to take it. Everybody's going to take a hit. But who's going to feel it the most? The people who are bringing in 25,000 a game on most nights, or the people who are bringing in 3,000 and rely on those tickets for 15 weeks out of the year to keep their club running. That's the difference that I think is matter. And again, this is why when we go back to the big thing, right? The people who are like, oh, I'm all in on USL and NISA, and then being like, oh, we don't want Don Garber speaking for us. Great. Don't let the most powerful guy in the world in the world of US soccer right now, and you can argue whether that's true or not, but I think we've seen that he's got enough pull where he can do a lot of what he wants to do. Let him just sit by and let it happen and see what happens, right? Or you can have him on your side and defending. Again, it's not the best situation. We're not saying that he's perfect and he's made great decisions. He's had and we've covered it. He's had a slew of terrible decisions over the last ones. But if you're going to stick a knife in his back while he's trying to be on the same side as you, it's an interesting take.
I think it's a really valid point. It's something I didn't think about, but yeah, I mean, definitely, if you're a team in MLS that's pulling in 25,000 and a couple of games a season, you pull 20 instead of 25,000 because Real Madrid or PSG or Man City's in town, like you're going to be okay. There's plenty of money in the league. You can make up for the money in player sales or jersey sales. But to your exact point, if you're a USL team and you're pulling 5K in games and now all of a sudden Real Madrid, PSG, Man City's in town and you're pulling 2K a game for a few games, like that could be huge on the financials. That could be a huge hit. You don't have MLS type ownership money to fall back on and be able to cover those a few games where you're down in attendance. And we were actually just this is sorry for the viewers, it's a little bit off topic for you, but I was just talking with Jay and Matt, and we were talking about the FA Cup and about how they're taking away the replays and how this could be a big hit to the lower league teams because they make a lot of their money from being able to host FA Cup games. And if it comes through a potential replay, that could be huge for a club. Like let's say like Wimbledon or something gets a game against Liverpool and they get a replay and they get to host now the second leg against the Liverpool. Like even if they don't win, that's got to be huge for their financials in terms of tickets and revenue and all that stuff. And I see it in a similar regard here where it's like you're taking it's like if you took it feels in a similar regard here because it feels like the lower league sides are the ones that are going to hurt more in this situation where their revenue comes in like in more concentrated ways as opposed to MLS where you can make revenue in multiple different ways. You're a bit more diversified in that regard. So if one area is taking a hit for a little bit, you're still okay.
Yeah, and that's my point, right? Is you can't sit here and be like, because I've seen both sides, right? Like, oh, I'm all in on USL, and then also want this to happen. I don't think the two can coexist, but that maybe I'm wrong. Whatever. I've heard a lot of people talk about how this is going to grow the game and this idea of growing the game by having all these big teams here, right? I've been thinking about this for really, really a long time now. Like not just leading up to the episode, but this is something I see all the time about how do we grow the game, right? I don't think that statement, that pure statement, we're going to grow the game, is focused enough for what you're talking about here. This is like it's such a broad statement when you really break it down and think about it. And what part of the game are we growing when we reference this? Are we growing interest in the game as a whole? Sure, right? You've got the biggest teams, the biggest names are showing up and they're playing locally. Now you're all in on it, right? Are we growing interest in local MLS, USL, and NISA sides? Unproven and probably not, right? Anyone who's tried to defend MLS or even USL for that matter against the Eurosnob comments online knows that the only comeback made pretty much to any point, any logical point you make is, well, Man City would walk this team. Barcelona in 2012 would kill this team. Nobody cares, right? So when you increase the growth of the game through European exposure, which is what they're trying to do here, it doesn't directly correlate, which I think is the confusion for a lot of people when they make the statement. It doesn't directly correlate to an increase in the growth of the game at the local level, right? When that's something I think you were referring to. And I think in areas it might, right? In areas it might. But in other areas, I don't think it does. I think it encourages, and I truly, I think it's a big city versus small town sort of thing, right? Lexington, Louisville, just because I'm, been in Kentucky for as long as I was, I think those places grow with stuff like this, right? Oh man, I got to see this awesome atmosphere with a big European game for the first time. I can't wait to go watch soccer forever now. And regardless of it, now you can connect to fans and players. And again, now you found yourself a European team and whatever, right? Places like New York City, Long Island, Chicago, I mean, like these bigger cities, that I think is where you have the opposite effect, where these people are like, oh, the only thing I'm going to care about is La Liga, the Prem, Liga MX, and I don't care about our local team, even though I've got two of them within 10-minute train ride because they're not as good. And that's kind of where you see that, to me, that little shift in focus. So, like I said, it's a very broad statement: grow the game, right? And how are we doing that? If we're going to grow the game through that, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be super successful. So that's my kind of issue on that one too.
So I mean, I think that, as I said before, I think there's potential that you could grow the game through it, depending on how the timing of things work, because you're obviously going to have your Euro snob group that is already fans of teams in Europe and doesn't care about MLS. That's not going to change anything there. They'll go see Real Madrid and whoever when they come over, and they still won't go see their local team. That's what I think we've discussed this enough times that we've come to the conclusion that you're just not going to win these people over, and that's fine. And then the nice thing, in my opinion, is I don't think that's the route MLS is taking when they're trying to expand into growing their fandom. I think they're looking in the route of the American sports fan that knows nothing about the sport and just hasn't learned about it, so therefore doesn't follow the sport. Your NFL fans, your NBA fans that just don't know much about soccer in general.
So let
And
me sorry, let me freeze you right there because this is building onto my point here, where we're a country that loves the best. NFL's the best, NBA is the best. MLB, I guess, is the best. I haven't seen a league that compares. And again, hockey, we've talked about not being the best, right? So now, if you're looking to hit that demographic, and that is the one that you want to say, this is what we're going to grow our league with. If we then bring the best league with the best players over and they start watching that, how likely are they to come back and be true followers of your league? That's where my holdup is because, yeah, that's our demographic, but that demographic also is used to watching the best at all times. Right. And you come back and you're watching. I mean, Nashville is a perfect example this weekend. Nashville tried to play out of the back 3 times against Man City, and Elliot Panico tried to kick the ball forward, and ended up shanking it and kicking out for a corner 2 out of those 3 times. He got pulled at halftime because he could not play out of the back against his team. If that is the demographic that you are trying to attract, right? And you're saying, okay, you're either going to watch Nashville, who's trying to play out of the back and continues to give the ball away and turnover, or you're going to watch Barcelona, Real Madrid. Are we going to lose those people? And I think that's and again, and it's not just an MLS thing. If that person is in a USL market, are we going to lose those people from the USL side, which is arguably, depending on the teams that you're comparing to, and even lower level than MLS, depending on the teams that you're talking about? Which ones are they more likely to see, right? And this is the big big picture that I'm kind of worried about with this idea.
I don't necessarily think that people need to have the best league to in order to watch it. I understand that that's what they're accustomed to, but I just think there's not necessarily leagues that are even remotely competitive to the ones that you were just talking about. Like nobody really around the world plays football other than us. So NFL is just kind of in a league of its own. NBA, there's other leagues around the world, but nothing that even like holds the smallest of torches to the NBA. Like it is leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of them. I don't necessarily think that they would have to see the same thing. And you could talk about like clearly like obviously MLS quality is below the quality of European teams, but that's not to say that European teams don't make the same stupid mistakes that MLS does. Right? I've seen so many times this season Chelsea make some stupid play out of the back trying to play it out and they hand a goal to the other team. And it's frustrating to watch and as a fan, but it happens in every league across the world. And you mentioned the example of Real Madrid versus Barcelona. Not every weekend is going to have a Real Madrid versus Barcelona type matchup. Most weekends are going to be Real Madrid against Mallorca. And how many people are necessarily going to be like, I need to get up at 8:30 a.m. Because I started to get into Real Madrid and I need to watch them play against Mallorca this weekend.
So what I'll argue with is if I had to guess, my guess is if we're going to pick one game to come on over here, it's not going to be a Mallorca versus Valladolid. They're going to bring the biggest game over here because guess
I
what?
don't know if they
Guess
would,
what? Money, baby.
but
You're
people,
telling me that if they can take a summer friendly where they're playing their third team and sell it at $200 a pop and sell out 80K stadiums in the United States, they're not going to jump on that in a minute.
and then could you imagine they take Real Madrid, Barcelona, bring it to the States? There would be riots in the streets of Spain.
My brother,
There's no
they're
way
looking
the people there would let that happen.
they're looking to take them straight out of their league entirely and put them in a super league with a bunch of the other top teams because they're going to make the most money. Like this isn't
That
like a
doesn't mean
could
that
you
the people in
this isn't a
Spain wouldn't be able to see them.
this isn't a could you imagine. This is a it's happening. Like and
I think these are two different things.
I don't. I think it's all tied together. Truthfully, I do.
I don't. I obviously yes, they will make 99% of their decisions with dollar signs in the eyes, but I just don't think they can get away with taking a game as massive as Real Madrid Barcelona and taking that away from the people in Spain and bringing it to the US. I don't think they can do that. I think it would be like having the Super Bowl in England. Could you imagine that? People in the US would probably be pissed if they did that.
Well, yeah, because nobody's spending that much money for England. They're trying to do that to raise their global brand, which is exactly what's happening all over the world with the biggest clubs who are preparing to go to the Super League. So a little bit off topic, right? However, I think that's a great conversation. It might be something we can dive into a little bit later. We'd love to know everybody else's thoughts on that because I think that's the biggest problem is the fact that having it there will grow the game generally as an interest in soccer. But I'm not sure it directly ties to a growth in MLS, USL, NISA for the same reason that the World Cup was not an instant growth factor to NASL. It is not the same level, and people don't want to watch the lower levels. It's the same reason why we don't have as big of a thriving lower level as we probably should in the country. But by the way, I appreciate your view on this, but I think I'm a little bit more cynical than you are in the same way that you were more cynical on the San Diego Academy than I was. I did have one more kind of topic on this before we kind of wrap the show up, right? And it was that phrase that I mentioned at the end there was like we're going to be forced to grow to catch up. And here is my kind of problem with that is I thought about it for a little bit, not super long, but long enough. I could not think of a single logical way on this wonderful planet Earth that can safely and intelligently get us to a level of exposure that Europe has without incurring extreme risk of being NASL 2.0, right? This idea that, oh, the fans are going to go to European games over there, so we just have to model their system and catch up, take away the salary caps, put ProRel in, and just do it. NASL saw Pele go to the Cosmos. Every other club tried to do the same with people who were not Pele, saw massive overspending, which led to huge cutbacks. And I believe the source that I had said it went to a strong salary cap in the 70s of 875,000 with I think it was 5 years of mandatory 10% cuts for the next 5 years if they wanted to try and survive. It like there's no, to me, logical way because, and I hate to say this, right? People overseas do not look at this league as a league of choice just yet. We're getting there. There are some people who are doing it, but nobody's waking up and is like, being born in Belgium is like, I can't wait to go to America to play soccer. Right?
Hmm.
It's the other way around, which is a cultural thing, by the way. It is simply just the way that culture is, and culture doesn't change with money. We saw that with our friends in Saudi Arabia. We've seen that with our friends in China. You can't change perception and culture with just money. You need time, you need history, you need commitment. Money is just a small part of that. So no matter what we do, there's always going to be this idea that MLS is inferior to Europe, or USL is inferior to Europe, or NISA isn't, whatever, right? Whatever league that we like is always going to be inferior to the other league by the broader American population, because that's just what we're used to. We're used to the best players who are advertised at the highest, most stardom level, right? And that's why the Prem is the most watched league here, right? Not La Liga, not Germany, even though they both clear in terms of quality, right at the top. We like you just mentioned Chelsea, and that was the other thing I want to tell you. Like, you're my boy, but when we talk about people who are like going to watch European teams, nobody's picking Chelsea anymore. Like they're like Everton. Nobody's picking Everton either. Like they're picking City, Arsenal, Tottenham, United, right? Like those are the ones now, and that's just the way it is. Do we want it to be that way? No. Do we like to change it? Yes. Is dropping everything and being forced to grow the way to do it? Absolutely not. Do the Rouse rules need to change? Yes. We've talked about that. But this sort of change is years to decades, not, weeks to months.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, right? Not weeks to months. So I think that much change in that short of a time inevitably will lead to failure. Like it has to be a calculated move. There's no chance that bringing a bunch of games here and seeing our attendances drop will just instantly be like, oh, switch it all up. Let's try and survive. Like I think it's a bad, but I'd like to hear your thoughts there.
I mean, I don't think necessarily games coming here is gonna like put MLS in a corner where they're like, well, we gotta just rip the band-aid off now. Like people who watch MLS, they know soccer. They know soccer overseas. They know the Real Madrids, the Man Cities. They know they're better teams. It's better quality. I don't think just because they bring it over here and you see it in person live, now all of a sudden you're like, I can't watch MLS anymore. Like this is a revelation. I saw Erling Haaland play live, and I just can't watch players like João Klaus anymore. That's it. Until they rip the roster rules off and I see Erling Haaland playing MLS, I can't follow the league anymore. They'll be fine. They're not going to be forced to make any of these changes. I think, the professionals that are hired to do this are doing the research they need to do in order to back up the way that they think this league should be put forward in terms of development. And considering the league has developed very, very well over the last few years, I have no reason to go against the way that they see the development of this league. So I think the league is fine. They're not going to be forced into any changes just because some of the bigger European teams come over and play a couple games here.
Yeah, and like I said, I truthfully am in agreement with you, right? I think that's probably the case, but I do think the bigger problem is going to be the lower leagues, right? And I know they're not connected. I know it's not connected like Europe, but those leagues are important too, right? They're landing spots for players like we mentioned before who don't make it out of the academy system, right off the bat. They're landing spots for other college players, right? Players in college who are looking to make the next step. What do we see? 12, 15 USLC to MLS moves. I think it was up like 20 or 25 USL1 to USLC. Like it's not connected, but it's connected. So if those things go away, quality in the league goes away, right? And that is always going to be a problem. So for the broader picture, I think it's a detriment more than a help. Like I said, I'm not saying they need to stay away completely. Like I think it's good to have them in every once in a while to keep soccer interest high, because again, I think there are enough people who are like, oh well, if I can only watch my team online, I have to find an illegal stream, and eventually I'm just gonna stop trying. Right? You can bring them over once in a while. It re-sparks that, and it keeps the interest high. And then yeah, maybe you're seeing that turnover, but I mean, if they're coming over 2-3 times a year, I mean, especially at the prices those tickets are going to be, you're saving for those 3, and that's about it.
Hmm.
But that's another story for another day.